Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. And today with me, I have my co-host from our Country Roads reports, Winston Shrout. We have Winston co-hosting with me today. How are you, Winston?
Doing okay.
And everyone knows our next guest he's a U.S. Marine Corps Special Section 20 and Back program, Captain Randy Cramer. And Randy is here to talk about some very interesting technology called medbeds. Welcome back to the GoldFish Report, Randy. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Louisa.
That's great. Well, Randy, we've heard a lot about these med beds, and I know that you have personal experience with this. And many viewers have contacted us as a result of this conversation coming up in previous reports. And they wanted to get more information. And this is perfect timing for us to do this report. You have a program, you have personal experience with this. First, can you tell us about a little bit about your personal experience with this and how you got into the program that you have going, and we're going to share that with our viewers as well.
Sure. Well, when I was in the MDF, which is the Mars Defense Force, and spent a number of years there getting my arms and legs and various body parts blown apart on a pretty regular basis, it certainly would have been a short career if they didn't have the technology to patch us back up in an amazingly incredible way. And so the ability at that level, and we're not talking about like what we could introduce to the general public to be the same evolved and developed technologies that we were using, but we're definitely talking about the same technology that can do the same thing, just not as fast, not as efficiently. So when I say that we were able to restore arms and legs within, depending on the amount of damage, sort of cubic centimeters of damage, you're talking about hours or days at the most. With the technology that we're going to be introducing, it's going to take longer to restore tissue. They're going to have to do sessions with people where they're going to have to be in the machine or act part of the machine is over them for a certain number of hours, if every day or daily or several times a day over a period of weeks to really restore like an arm that's been removed or a leg that's been blown out. But we'll still be able to do it. So the fact that it will take much longer and be a little more tedious of a process as we get out the gate than the advanced technology that we use, it's just the difference between technology that's been developed for decades versus technology that in the civilian world we're essentially having to develop from the ground up, which the reason we have to do that is because of this wall of classifications, Espionage Act, et cetera, which means that no one can hand me a blueprint, no one can hand me a schematic, no one can hand me a prototype, no one can hand me a component, but if I understand how those things work, there are people who I can get advice from asking specific questions. They can't necessarily, again, hand the information to me, but if I understand the information and the component well enough to ask the right questions, I will always be able to get a correct answer so that when I say that, we have enough information to develop this, we do. We do, but it is also in puzzle pieces that we have to put together because this wall of classification is designed to do just exactly what it's doing, which is prevent the quick, easy, fast access of this technology into the civilian world. So we accept that. We accept that obstacle. We accept that it's not going to happen fast. We accept that it's not going to be quick. We accept that it's not going to be easy. And we accept that it's not going to be a full component modeled device that we can just use, that we're going to have to put the pieces together. But I can assure you, I understand the components very well. And the two main components are software and hardware. The software, luckily, someone else already took some time to develop the early software. And so we're already looking at the modeling of that software and talking about problem solving to get it to be the software that we need it to be. We've already looked at the hardware components of what need to be part of the device, the functional parts of the device that are the most critical. And we know that the basic functions of those hardware components, the basic place where industry sort of has the efficiency and precision of those components, and then at what point we're picking that up and moving to the level of precision and that we need, and sort of what
Amazing.
frequencies, wavelengths, and sort of picometers, it turns out we're measuring in that we're going after. And this is the part where I start getting really tight-lipped, because I've talked to my chief and my software engineers enough to know to not talk too much more about our proprietary process and where we're going from there.
Okay.
But satisfied to say that there's a couple of components. I've had them used on me so many times that, I have all my digits where they weren't many, many times over.
Well, it looks good. The arms look, like they function.
Yeah, they're not
It
too
looks
bad
like
at the
they're
moment.
real, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it does a good job. I mean, it really is complete. It looks very, very, thorough. Like
yeah,
it.
yeah. If it only healed the psychological and emotional trauma of having your body blown apart and ripped apart, several thousand times, which it
Doesn't
doesn't.
do
It
that.
doesn't at all. It
Doesn't
doesn't at
do
all.
that.
So that's my own thing that I have to deal with.
Right.
But that's okay, because I can at least have the positive outlook of, I got all my fingers, my toes, and everything. So.
Right. I mean, look at these guys that come back from these wars, and they're sadly, they're walking around. Some aren't even walking. I mean, but they're in Walter Reed with their trying to rehabilitate with their prosthetics and all that stuff, and that's and that's tough. That's really tough too. So it's really a shame to deny them this technology. I mean, I'm sure Winston has seen it too, but.
Well, I think we could go a step further, and I think it's criminal, to be honest with you. I think denying them the access to technology, which is commensurate with their dedication of life of service, that, there's a justification there, both civil, legal, and moral, that it's a criminal violation actually to deny them a level of care which could completely change the quality of their lives, and make the difference between functional and just not functional at all. And even people who become functional with the handicaps of losing arms and legs, it's never going to be the same, as how you could function with them. So we don't think that we go beyond saying that it's not fair, not right, or just. It's criminal. It's a criminal violation of what we as a society, of what our social contract with soldiers, like what that contract is, and what we owe to put them back together when they're willing to go out there and get themselves blown up and ripped apart for it. So the social contract that we have with them is such that we owe them the best use of whatever technology that we have, the highest level of technology that we have, and we're not using it on them, we're not giving it to them. And so I think that's a criminal violation. I will even go so far to say we think that's a criminal violation.
Do you think President Trump is trying to do this? He just signed an executive order to help fund, services for vets, and for particularly psychological, to try to help people reacclimate, soldiers reacclimate into coming back from the war zone. Is that executive order going to help, maybe? Because you also know that he promised to release, in his inauguration speech, he promised to release these he didn't specifically say which technologies, but he did say, advanced technology. So do you think that this is really opening the door? We're at the time now where, so you have a project, are they going to interfere, or do you think it's time? We're at this time to really get this out and going now.
We don't care whether it's one or the other. We honestly could care less whether they think it's time, they plan to interfere or not. We could care less, because we're anticipating all possibilities and contingencies, because we simply have a trajectory in which this will be done. I've made it perfectly clear more than once to people who have come to me that I have not sought after, I have not hunted them down. People have come to me and said, how can we make this happen faster? And I have sat down and said, okay, here are the basic numbers that it's going to take to get this off the ground, which is quite a bit of money, right? I don't go around throwing money, because I'm not trying to directly fundraise from the general public that money, because it's millions and millions of dollars to get the project off the ground, right? It has to pay the salaries of my chief engineer, my chief software engineer, and 2 full teams of engineers and 2 laboratories in a location where I can also contract security services from Marines, and my rank and position allows me to do that. And so essentially there's a list of things that I could go down, but I'm not going to go down at the moment, in which we have planned to protect and fund this, no matter what. The difference here is how long it's going to take, right? If I honestly have to paddle my own canoe on this as an independent field commander, which we have outlined a plan to do, it's going to take longer. Mm-hmm. If people really want to believe that this can be something and should be something that we should have access to sooner, well, then they have to, be serious about it. And when I say that, let me be very specific about what I mean. Some people like people who all they have to give, or help out with is $12 here or $20 there. Those people have been really wonderful, and they have just tried to throw their nickels and dimes to help out. And I'm deeply always appreciative of every little bit that people want to, throw into the pot. But this isn't going to happen with, people throwing in $25. And so until the people who actually have the real funds to throw down for this get serious with me, and I say this having dealt with so many people in the last year who wasted my time, and I mean wasted my time, and I'm done with having people waste my time. And so people who seriously want to invest in this project, who want to talk about return on investment, who want to talk about access to the technology, we're perfectly willing to talk about that. But people have to stop demanding ridiculous things in return for their investment dollars. Okay, I'm saying that out loud because I've had enough people ask for ridiculous things in return for their investment dollars. We're not providing it. We're not doing it. We're not giving you ridiculous things no matter how much money you want to offer. Mm-hmm. And my engineers have to be paid. Like, they have to have their salaries paid. I have to have an account that pays my engineers for 10 years before I will start, because I will not get 5 years into a project and tell my engineers, oh, sorry, we ran out of money this year, and now I got to go fundraise again. That's not happening. That's not happening. People who understand how these projects works know that you can't do that. Know that you can't get a project halfway started, halfway funded, and then have it die because you didn't get the funding you needed to keep your people working when you needed to have it working. So I've made it very clear there's a threshold, there's a ground floor for what this takes to get off the ground. We have a plan and agenda for how that's going to happen without me asking or getting $1 from another human being. That's going to take a while. And so, and I have no problem with that, right? I will do it that way. I, of course, would love to bring it to the world faster, but I can't do it unless people want to become really participatory in that process.
Right. Okay.
Because what I've gotten is I just want to say one time, I've had a lot of time wasted. I've had a lot of promises made. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of promises not kept. Right. So at this point, I don't need my time wasted by people anymore who want to talk about making this happen. Anyone who's serious about making this happen needs to understand that my people have to have job security. We have to have secure laboratory space. We have to have security personnel, because I'm not taking any risks for whether someone's going to mess with my project or interfere or try and, kick the door in. I'm going to make sure that we are prepared, as I've discussed with the command staff and my brigadier general, how to make sure none of that goes awry by ensuring that all of our contingency plans are accounted for. So this isn't, an operation I'm running out of the back of my pickup truck. Okay. And so and I'm not speaking to the general public, right? I'm not speaking to, people who, given their nickels and dimes and really just because that's what they, in their heart, they can do. I'm thankful for that. Speaking to the people who have it and are holding on to it, like, I don't know who you think you are, holding on to all of that wealth for yourself and not putting it into something that has value in it, and not understanding that this isn't just a humanitarian project either. Okay, I tried to make this very clear. We understand that we still live in a capitalist economy globally, right? It's the economy we live in. That's not changing anytime soon. I don't care what anybody says, because it hasn't changed, and it's not going to tomorrow. No matter what you juggle numbers with, we're still going to have a market-based system that is based on a certain amount of supply, demand, competition, etc. So we understand that the way that we bring this technology to the world is not simply as a humanitarian project that's funded with billions of bottomless dollars. We understand that this project is funded as a viable medical technology whose cost to build, operate, and maintain is less than that of an MRI machine. Okay? That means the ability to create a pennies on the dollar medical service is what we can provide. Market to the marketplace. Okay, I want people to understand that. This isn't just brilliant. This isn't just humanitarian. This doesn't just put people's arms and legs back together. We've done, some of the bean counting, and we know that a finished device provides medical care or the equivalent of medical care service in, essentially restoring cuts, bruises, broken bones, etc. Keeping in mind that most of the things that these devices can restore will either be minor or reserved for major injuries. We also have a scaling of other technology. This is not something we talk about much. My chief engineer and I have talked about this. We have a scaling of other technology that's non-invasive, that does the same thing, but in a slightly different way. So, for instance, a smaller portable unit that would be about the size of a dental x-ray machine. If you've been to the dentist and had your x-rays taken recently, those are small. It's not a big device, a dental x-ray machine. It has a big swing arm over it. Most of your in-house abrasions, burns, cuts, bruises, and it can be maintained with a smaller device, done over a short period of time with a device that costs even less than the HOLOBED device, right? Because there's a scaling. So we have the ability to have smaller devices that are not going to be effective at bringing back a broken arm, a severed arm. It's not going to do that. But it will still be able to restore pretty much any damaged tissue that's already there in a short period of time using a smaller, cheaper device. So there's a scaling of devices here and technology that we're talking about introducing that is able to not just do this awesome, cool humanitarian thing we're talking about. We're talking about something that a scaling device system that inserts and or parallels as a medical device in the medical system for cheaper than other services can be provided for, thereby winning the market argument. That's how this really just wins, okay? Because it wins the market argument. It isn't about throwing billions of dollars into something for decades in order to see it benefit or see a profit from it because it's going to cost so much money. The development is going to cost a few dollars, but once we have prototypes and protocols, and I've already talked to some industry people, really the cost per device, like I said, it will be less than an MRI machine. So, and when you think about how much anyone who knows medical industry knows how much MRI machines just sit there and make money just doing imaging all day long, in some cases all night long, we're talking about a medical device which could provide restoring medical services, not imaging, restoring medical services for pennies on the dollar of imaging. I hope there's somebody who can freaking understand what I'm talking about when I talk about this business math, because I need just a couple of smart business people who understand what freaking heck I'm talking about. There, I bit my tongue for you, Winston.
Sure.
So if I can just get a couple of business savvy people who understand that this is not money into a hole, this is return on investment. This is solid return on investment.
There's been definitely.
I'm done with my soapbox there, but it's solid. It's not just a good idea. It's economically brilliant.
It sounds it. I mean, and there's a lot of people on this planet. There's so many people who need this. And Winston, let me ask you if you want to weigh in on this in terms of finance, or if you have any questions or anything comments you want to make at this point.
No, not now.
Okay. One of the things that I like this idea of scaling the devices. It looks like according to different levels of repair. Is that kind of what is that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the technologies are also what I would say slightly different, but similar. And without talking proprietary information, my chief engineer and I have discussed this at some length. And yeah, we're talking about a scaling of devices, even to the point of of a handheld device that could heal, bruises and abrasions and small cuts and burns and things.
I mean, there was some talk going on about, how like in 2 minutes you can have your whole body restored, and you can have yourself restored to the age that you want, and stay at that age in like 2 minutes. I mean, this doesn't take 2 minutes, does it?
There is no technology that I'm aware of that can do that. This technology takes a bit longer to do that than that. It can
Okay.
restore a healthy body to an even healthier state in a relatively short period of time, but we're still talking about a couple hours,
Yeah,
like
I
minimum, a couple hours.
I didn't think 2 minutes. I thought that was a
Yeah,
little overly ambitious. Yeah, I wanted to screen
that's
share this.
ridiculous. That's,
I wanted
that's
to.
I'm gonna go further. It's ridiculous. 2 minutes is ridiculous.
Okay, I'm going to screen share this. You have someone who had set up a GoFundMe site, but this has a lot of information about. This is a conceptual design. Do you want to explain what we're looking at? I know this is
Right.
conceptual, but
It's just a conceptual design, probably from some film project, demonstrating some advanced technology, but that's certainly not what the device that we're talking about would actually look like, or any kind of actual imaging from that. That's pretty much artist's conception of advanced medical technology.
okay.
And the information contained in the page was fairly accurate as far as what the device can do, and sort of what we need, which is just to create a ground floor of funding to,
Sorry about
again, pay
that.
my engineers their salaries so they can get to
Oops.
work.
Right.
Um,
So this is called
and so yeah,
this is called the holographic regenerating medbed, and
which
this
we,
is,
for short, we just call a HOLOBED, just to be clear.
you call it. I'm sorry. Could you repeat?
A HOLOBED.
A hollow bed. Oh, I haven't heard that before. A hollow
Yeah,
bed.
that's
Very
what we're
good.
we're calling it, the HOLOBED for short.
Excellent. No, that's brilliant. And so it says here that it regrows limbs, cures all diseases, including cancer, age
Yep.
regress an older body to a younger body, and allow us to live much longer. And it went into really kind of more specific things. The blindness, the deafness. We're talking on a molecular level. We're talking, on an amino acid level. And can you give us a little bit, like, now let me ask you something. I mean, this is just a practical question. But when you take a look at this machine, it does this holographically, but doesn't it have to have the raw material to repair you, or is it fine? Is it doing something to your body to regenerate the repair itself? How's that work?
Well, your body has its own repair process, right? So your body provides all of its own nutrients and all of its own aminos to restore cellular tissue when it's damaged. Your body does that on its own. It just does it slowly and with certain limitations and scar tissue and so forth. So what I would call the earlier stages of the device that we'll be using, and certainly the scaling down and for the lesser injuries and so forth, you're not adding any material whatsoever. You're just letting the body use its own material to recover and heal faster, which is sometimes why you need a good IV, a nutrient IV in someone's arm, or why you might need to do it in sessions, because you might literally be taking nutrients from that person's reserve that's faster than they can eat food. And so you may need to, either, feed them. So in some cases we were tube fed. It was not fun, but some cases they just tube fed us. In other cases they, gave us this, just crazy nutrient drip that goes right into your bloodstream. But also used a pipe, hoses to pipe in, liquid building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
But that was to repair extreme tissue injuries, where giant pieces of tissue and parts of your body are just gone or just missing, and you literally need, pounds of new material. When you need that, you need extra. But for what we're talking about as the development process, we won't need any of that. We're just going to allow the body to use its own nutrients to restore the cells that we're telling it to restore, that it would restore anyway if it could, or if it didn't believe that it couldn't, or had a programming that said that it could, then we're just doing the same thing.
Is this video here now? Is this something? Should I play a little bit of it, or is this helpful, or can you describe what this?
I'm not sure. That's, I think, is just a short snippet video, which has
Okay.
some clips of, again, some probably proprietary information that comes from somewhere else, again, that this
Oh,
person put
okay.
together, with some of clips of me saying things, and some, it's
Right.
a, people who've seen it have said that it's a good
Hmm.
10-minute, synopsis, or 7 minutes or whatever, of what we're kind of talking about. And we certainly were talking about putting together a better presentation video. Actually, my engineer and I doing one that
Sorry.
we made with our own video conceptual information, and getting an artist to do our own conceptual design and so forth,
This messed up.
instead of using all this sort of other information, which is essentially, again, these are all stuff from films. So that's like from,
Right. But again, it's a very
you
good
know,
conceptual understanding. Maybe there. See, look at that.
it
That's just
helps.
look at that.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that helps, but again, that's somebody else's proprietary video, and so we
Yeah.
can't really use
Well,
that.
for
If we
education,
want
it's well for fair use. I think it's okay because we're
Um,
doing
uh,
educational.
yeah, right now, I mean, for this, I mean, for what's done there, and what's
Yeah.
happening at the moment, yeah, that's fine. But when I say what we need to
Oh,
produce,
you need. Yeah.
my engineers, that I
Of
need to
course.
produce our own presentation video,
Uh-huh.
it would have to be something that we did, and we made, and we designed, and was our proprietary information, and our
Mhm.
proprietary conceptual art, and
Sure.
so forth. We were putting one together before someone monkey wrenched,
Look at
our
that. Yeah.
system last year, and set us back quite a bit. So we'll continue to work on that the minute that we have restoration of our funding to get back to work on that.
Right. Well, this is just conceptual that, these things are possible and, we need to kind of think outside the box. Here's that image there. But so just, to help give our viewers an understanding, they just think this is, I mean, many people may think this is like sci-fi but this is the real thing. And um, so what happens
Yeah,
when,
and it turns.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. It just turns out when you really talk fundamentally about the technology that you're using, it's not as rocket surgery, or as really even as amazingly advanced as some of the technologies in films want to show you they are. Like technologies show where they're rebuilding people's building blocks, with 3D printers, 3D DNA printers or something like that. That's insanely advanced compared to what we're talking about. We're really talking about taking some fundamental basic technologies that within the last 10, 20 years, we've really started to access them as advanced technologies in our own society that we didn't have 30 years ago, but we do now.
Okay.
That really just a fundamental, precise application of those technologies can accelerate and assist in the cellular regeneration process to the point of it being like miraculous. So, but it's just access to more advanced science as we move forward as a society and a civilization and through time.
And here's another screen share, another conceptual design. This is a
Mm-hmm.
conceptual design of what we're talking about. It may or may not be exact, but this is the kind of this is the goal. I mean, do you see you see this? I mean, this has to be in a sterile
Yeah, I
room,
think that. Yeah,
correct?
that's actually that's actually like a conceptual design of a robotic surgery bed, which is not
Oh,
what we're talking about at all. But again,
okay,
these are just conceptual designs that people are
right.
using to describe sort of advanced technologies. But a robotic surgery, a self-administrating surgery bed, is not much better than we have now. I would not consider a self-operating surgery bed to be that advanced. I think that that's just going back to the dark ages, but trying to use robots or something to do it. But
Mhm.
when we have non-invasive cellular regenerative restorative technologies that can just
Mhm.
build you back up from the bottom up, wherever the damage has been done, to perfection again.
But this is the goal. It's going to look something like this. Is this what you're saying? It's got to be in a sterile
Um,
environment, things like
to
that,
be
or is it
honest,
going to
it's
be not quite?
It'll depend. I mean, it'll depend on really the person's injuries,
Okay.
and it will depend on the room itself. If the room is sterile enough, you don't necessarily have to have a pod that keeps the person sterile or contained. But
Okay.
those are all things to sort out down the road. That
Very
design
helpful.
engineers and people, as we start to actually talk about, administering the device in a city by city way, which we've also, figured out, have initial plans for how the pilot programs would work and so forth. Anyway,
Okay.
we've thought all that out.
Okay, I'm going to go back to screen sharing this GoFundMe site, and I just want to, can you give our viewers any more information about this so they know? I'm going to put the link to this in the description section of the video, so our viewers can go, you click on that link and you go right to this page.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And you get that information that you need. Now, Randy, is there also information on how to contact you on this page? Or if not, how can they contact you if they have, if there's a big donor out there who really has the heart of gold and wants to help humanity and really wants to put some funds behind this, how are they going to reach you?
Then they should email me, which is the same email on my website, which you have my email. That's the CaptainK444 @gmail. You can put that up and people can, that's really the best way for people who are serious to reach me. And and I just, put it clearly again to people who are serious, don't waste my time. Be serious. I've had enough of my time wasted this year. I got a family to take care of and, a roof to put over our heads, and I don't have my time wasted.
Absolutely. Now, this is going to help. Is this these initial phases? Is this what is this particular project right here that we're looking at? What is this helping, going towards?
This is just what I would consider our bottom gutter level funds to get more funds and get us off the ground. So that doesn't pay for, anybody's salaries. That just gets us enough that I can pay at least my chief engineer and my software engineer for their time, so that when we can dedicate some more time to, I can at least give them some contracting projects to start with that I can pay them for, because they don't work for free. They have families to take care of and roofs to keep over their families' heads too. Right. And most of them have kids, where my wife and I are hoping to have kids, but then, the other guys mostly have children. They have families, so they can't do this work for free. So when I can pay them to do the work that they need to do, that we can move this forward, that we can get our presentation video taken care of, and that we can have I understand that some investors want to see a better presentation of what we're doing. We're happy to work on that and make that happen. We're happy to discuss that. I have said to several people, you want me to get my chief engineer on the phone? You want me to get him in the room? We'll sit down and talk about it right now, but just don't waste my time. And so I just have people still wasting my time. It's annoying me.
Okay, let me ask Winston. Winston, do you want to, do you have any comments that you'd like to make at this time? Or questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions that probably the listeners might come up with.
Okay.
And so I'll ask 2 or 3 of these questions, and then Randy can comment.
Okay.
This equipment and this technology, would it in fact remove, for instance, a cancer tumor? Would it actually regenerate or cause diseases to abate? And for instance, would it actually bring you up to 20/20 vision with your eyesight? Those are kind of questions, that people would think about.
Absolutely. And so the fundamental basis of how this works is we get a perfect map of the person's body using their own DNA, and map that DNA in a software model. The software model then tells the hardware what model we want to project. And so we essentially are using the subject's own DNA as the framework, as the modeling, and essentially the device which tells the cells to change, tells them to be in the framework of the perfect DNA structure. And so they just change on their own. So cancer cells would either self-destruct or would convert to a healthy state, or would convert down to some sort of unmetastasized healthy cell state. So a damaged cell would restore itself to a healthy state. An aged cell would restore itself to a younger, more vitalized state. So essentially the cellular tissue itself just is encouraged in a way through this technology that is beyond anything else to become its own perfect framework of itself again.
Okay. On some other matters, many people have had hip replacements, knee joint replacements, and so forth. Would those have to be removed prior to this restoration?
That is an interesting question. And to be honest, if you wanted to restore someone back to their full sort of, body state, and they had a metal or a plastic hip component, that component would have to be removed. And it would have to be replaced with a bone component. Now, the bone components that they can replace with would essentially act as a placeholder just while you use the device to restore everything to, again, perfect cellular definition. So I'll use a really good example. My mother's had 2 surgeries in the last few years, one which was for a hip replacement, and the other which was for the replacement of 5 vertebrae in her spine that had degenerated, and they had to take them out and replace them with 5 new ones. Now, the hip replacement is a plastic replacement. The spine replacement, they did not insert plastic or metal or composite discs. They actually made new vertebrae out of bone powder that they mixed with her blood to make it her body part. So she has 5 bone vertebrae in her spine that are held together by a rod, but there's 5 bone vertebrae in there. So in my mother's case, if we were to use this device on her, that plastic hip would have to come out, and we would have to put a bone replacement in to hold it while we restored the hip replacement. And the spine the vertebrae in her spine would not have to be taken out, but the rod would have to come out because it's a metal placement, and the holes would want to fill in to the gaps where the rod are, and as the vertebrae became solid, regenerated, youthful tissue again, vitalized tissue again. So that's a good question, and that's a good example.
Can you address dental problems?
Same issue. As long as the composites are natural, so they do use like some natural bone composites, that would not need to be removed. Metal composites would have to be removed before the device could be used to restore them.
How about if a tooth was completely missing?
As long as the genetic code has that tooth in its place, the body would literally grow another tooth.
Okay. Well, those are some of the questions people would typically ask. I thought just
those are good questions.
This would just transform society, though. I mean, what quality of life people would have. I mean, immediate improvement of quality of life, and that's what this is about. It's about quality of life for people who could benefit from this, and it's almost everybody, isn't it, Randy?
Well, if I'll get on my soapbox for a second here, if I may, if you go back just say 5 or 6 centuries as history, and you talk about the things that came along to advance civilization forward, it wasn't, whether King Henry was king or whether King Louis was king, or, whether necessarily we were using iron swords or bronze swords, but it had a lot more to do about whether we were using torches for lighting, or whether we were using candles for lighting, or whether we were using oil lamps or gas lamps or light bulbs, whether we had plumbing, whether we were taking our sanitation out in buckets and bringing our water in buckets, or whether we had plumbing to bring in water and take out waste. The real advancements of civilization are things which are sort of the rising tide that lifts all boats. It's the thing across the board that everyone gets to have some kind of experience or access to that changes everybody. When there used to be a time when everything traveled at the speed of horse. Everything in the world traveled at the speed of horse. If you wanted to send a letter, it traveled at the speed of horse. If you wanted to go from Miami to Boston, you traveled at the speed of horse. And that was the way it was for centuries, thousands of years even, that we moved at the speed of, that was the fastest speed you could go on planet Earth, or send anything anywhere, was at the speed at which a horse could get there. And then the train came along. And all of a sudden, the speed of horse was defied, and all of a sudden we could move things faster than the speed of horse. So it's the technologies that change fundamentally the way we do one thing, just across the board, and just changes it. So absolutely, we are planning that this technology will do two things. It will be able to enter into the marketplace, as we say, as a low baller, right? As something that is being able to offer a service at a lower cost than other services. But we also hope that at that point, it will spur the competition necessary that other people will want to start to get, will basically, let me put it another way. You know, here's where we are. It's like, this is our level of technology, invasive surgery, drugs. We want to bring it up to here, right? And if we bring it up to here, the competition is going to have to come up. And so all of a sudden, they're going to get out of the business of drugs and invasive surgeries too, and everyone else is going to start getting into the game of advanced technologies. And the way that happens is when one person, one company, one device, one invention, go back through history, and this is the way it always was, one person, one company, one invention came along and broke the so-called glass ceiling of whatever was the standard, and then the standard went up.
Sure.
So we absolutely are thinking long-term and in a very specific way that this is something that works like all of those other devices and inventions throughout history, that it enters into the marketplace, does better, provides a better service for a better cost, which makes the economy thrive because it puts more money back in people's pockets, and it creates a smoother operational business model instead of a burgeoning or parasitic business model. So that's good and healthy for the economy. And it raises the standard. Raises the standard to a point that anyone else who wants to get in the game now is going to start to compete, and they'll be able to do it. They'll be able to do it, and they'll be able to do it for huge amounts of money. So there will be some people who will be able to come in and create inferior technologies that cost more money, that they will charge clients more money to use. Mm-hmm. And they will make billions of dollars doing that, because there are people who will pay for that technology because we will not be able to get 100% access out the door. No one can. No one can. No one can ever get 100% access out the door. So we understand that our initial access is going to be in tenths of a percent, right? We know that. We know that. But we know that we have a model that is designed to steadily increase that number just over time until it gets to be 10%, 20%, 50%, 80%. You know, we would like to see 100% this century. Let me put it that way. We'd like to see 100% this century, but we don't think that we're going to get 100% 10 years from now. But that's not the point. The point is that we get it out there, that raises the standard. Other people will raise their standard in the competitive market, and that will motivate and push civilization in a direction. The only thing that has ever pushed civilization in a direction, which is demand of a better technology.
Absolutely.
Okay? Anyone who really understands that, who understands history, who understands economics, understands that the true demand for an invention is what moves history. And so we're trying to move history with the demand for an invention that will be better for the market, better for the person, better for, you know, people participating in the marketplace on all levels, and will enable a era where we can get away from this old crappy thing that we're doing that's, you know, going to break our backs, and move on to something that's just more advanced and just get it over with, because too many people are resisting it. And so at some point we're just going to have to just charge ahead and make it happen. And so we have every intention to make it happen.
Well, the people who are resisting it are people who people who are in business of keeping people sick, not healing them.
Oh yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah. So, you know, that's the problem.
And keeping doctors wealthy, like the AMA, which, you know, artificially keeps the numbers of doctors low. So it's, you know, it's just good luck, move to a new town, try and find a doctor that's taking new patients right now, because we don't have enough doctors. Because the AMA wants to keep the numbers lower. But I mean, there's a number of things that are keeping doctors artificially inflated as wealthy individuals, when we should just have more doctors. We should just have more of them available. That would change the whole network. When we know that systems in Europe that don't spend 25% of their time on insurance billing, that's 25% more time for patient care.
Right.
So, you know, we know by these other systems that when we can change certain things about the way we do our business, they'll just improve. But some of those things you're not going to come along and change from the inside out. And I want to point out that throughout history, some departments and some entities and some institutions were not changed from within. Other institutions were created to replace them. And those institutions died, right? Just died on the vine, while some other new thing said, no, we're going to pop up and we're going to replace this old outdated thing. And the change from the 19th to the 20th century saw a lot of that. Saw a lot of old institutions and old ways of doing things literally being replaced by new buildings, new administrators, new personnel, and entire systems disappearing. To be honest, Alcatraz is a perfectly good example of that. It was seen as a prison, as essentially falling apart and becoming just a really terrible place to put people. And that was why it was closed down, right? It wasn't just like we can fix this from the inside out. It was closed down because it was so horrible. And for anyone who lives on the East Coast, it's the same reason Rikers needs to just be closed down. Rikers Island will never be fixed from within. Rikers Island will never be made better. Rikers Island will never be fixed. It needs to be ended. And an entirely new holding facility needs to be created with a whole new administration system and new personnel, because what's rotten about Rikers will never be fixed.
Well,
so there are certain things about these entities that will also never be fixed from within. So we intend to just make another system, another institution that will replace it.
That's it. That's the key, Randy. It has to replace it, just like, and Winston, you can comment on this too, just like the BRICS countries formed an alliance and they formed the new AIIB and of course the new money transfer system to replace the old, which refused to conform and to refused to have a conscience. I mean, they were really corrupt, as the financial system, and we know we're getting a new financial system. What's the prospects here, Winston, in terms of financing this kind of thing with this global currency reset and NACARA? Do you see this? There's a place for this? You think people will demand it once we have these changes, Winston?
Well, to answer that question, I'd say yes. Obviously, yes. But let's not get into that. I'm going to go back to being a consumer again. I want that. As a consumer, I would like to know what are the dangers and or drawbacks to what this equipment would do.
Sure, and those are things that we know that we have to hammer out in research and development. So as what I know is going to be a fine tuning of the process, which will mostly be about adjusting your levels. Again, I don't want to talk about too much proprietary information, but one of the things we're going to have to sort out are cellular growth rates and cellular restoration rates. And we know that there's some danger in trying to accelerate those faster than you can get the body to metabolize, can produce abnormal cellular growth. So, the danger of the device is if it's not operated properly, like a lot of devices, then it cannot work properly. And so what we have to understand through research and development are what your ranges are for those levels. So as we, fine tune restoring legs on mice and hamsters and rats and frogs and things, we'll be able to perfect that. And as we get to mammals, we'll be able to perfect that. So by the time we get to our human trial subjects, we will absolutely know what our ranges are supposed to be and what our limitations are supposed to be for cellular growth and regeneration, and make sure that the technicians understand how to keep the device within range. So the dangers aren't so much that the device itself is dangerous, so much is that you're doing something that requires some precision. And if you don't do it precisely, then you can do it wrong. And if you do it wrong, then you can have some abnormal cellular growth. But that's also something that could be restored by effective use of the machine.
Exactly. You have to know what you're doing.
So essentially, if a technician didn't know what he was doing and he messed it up and he messed up your leg, someone could come along and go, "Oh, dude, you messed that up." Push him aside, who knows how to operate the dials of the machine, make sure that it's within proper parameters, and restore the damaged tissue. So yeah, that's the answer to that question.
So are you saying like
there's really no
sorry, go ahead,
really no real danger, just the the danger of abnormal cell growth if a technician might not be using the device in the correct parameters, which could be corrected by someone who knows how to use the device correctly. So,
okay, next question.
technical answer, I guess.
Apparently the technology would work off a hologram based upon your DNA. So is it possible that because of environment and so forth, would it be possible that this hologram would actually project your true size, hair color, weight, and all the rest of it? In other words, should I have been, 6 foot tall instead of 5'3"? Would it in fact impact that?
That's a very good question, and we're going to learn some things about that in the research.
Okay.
And what we know about that now, let me tell you what we know about that now. What we know about that now is that your DNA does change. And so, for instance, if we took a sample of your DNA when you were a baby, and we took a sample of your DNA when you were 12, and we took a sample of your DNA when you were 35, we took a sample of your DNA when you were 55, each of those samples would have variation. They would have things in them that you, as a biological entity, would have changed about yourself through growth, learning, and understanding. So it turns out that not only do we adapt mentally, not only do we adapt physically, our DNA actually starts to physiologically change and adapt as we get older. And so there's some information that's becoming a little bit better known about how this might affect offspring. So your genetics, obviously, when you're 22 aren't the same as when you're 32. And we know that it's not just physical things, it's mental, emotional, psychological things that change your DNA. So, and this is all not like fringe science. This is pretty like modern, like genetic science that I'm talking about here. Pretty mainstream modern genetic science that understands this now. So there's some really interesting questions about, what kind of a child would you have if you had a child of 22 versus 32 or 42, or 16 based on your own DNA, the DNA of your partner. There's some very interesting questions about that. So to answer that question more specifically, if we had a sample of your DNA from when you were a baby, that might be a problem, because then that DNA might not match close enough to who you are right now. But what we are going to do is take a sample of your current DNA, but the sample of that DNA is still going to be a perfect version of yourself right now. So that version is the version we're going to use in the software, because we're not going to want to actually try to restore you to 22 years old. That would actually be, for a list of reasons I could get into, that's not a healthy thing at all. Not a healthy thing at all. In fact, this is not a device that we would use for cosmetic purposes. I mean, if you're a burn victim, and your face is burnt, there's certain cosmetic things, clefts and so forth, that are medical, legitimate cosmetic medical reasons. But just because someone wants to look younger, that's not a reason for us to use this technology. We have no intention to use this technology for cosmetic purposes in that fashion. Not only because it's not very good, it's not easy to do it. In some cases, you can't do it because you have to take a sample from someone when they're older and they want to restore to when they're younger. You can get them to restore to a more youthful, perfect state of themselves, but it still won't be exactly like they were when they were 22. But the main problem is the psychological problem.
Okay.
What we have found in our own research is that if you take a 55-year-old man or woman and you restore them head to toe to how they looked and felt when they were 25 years old, shock and surprise, they start acting like a 25-year-old. They start acting like they did when they were 25. And so the psychological problem is people regress. And you don't want people to regress. You don't want people to, regress in their emotional and psychological maturity. And that's what happens. All of a sudden, someone's looking in the mirror and they're not seeing the mature 55-year-old anymore. They're seeing a 25-year-old, and all of a sudden they start associating themselves as being 25 again. So there's actually a serious psychological, emotional dilemma that comes in when we do that. So what we do internally, we have people who are definitely older than 55, but you don't look at from the neck up.
Sure.
Because You know, it doesn't matter how old you get. We don't want you to look younger than that because you won't look in the mirror and see the right person. You'll see someone who's younger and less experienced and stupider than you are. And you'll identify with that person in the mirror more than you might identify with the age that you actually are. And as a perfect example to that, when I was restored back to 17 years old and put back in, you know, a position in a time space where I wake up and I'm like, oh, what, I'm 17 again. I look in the mirror, I see a 17-year-old and oh, this is where I was when I was 17. What do? I identify myself that way. Now, I struggled with that, right? Of course, like, wait, am I really this age? Why do I feel older? Why do I not feel the age I'm supposed to be? I mean, it was a struggle, but I still identified with who I looked in the mirror and who was looking back at me.
Okay.
So you will identify with that person. And so we don't want to use it for cosmetic purposes to make people younger than they really are because it fucks people's heads. Sorry. That's just what
Next question. Would this technology have any benefit to victims, for instance, of autism?
Now, that's an interesting question. And some of that is going to definitely come up to the actual mapping of the DNA.
Well, a lot of our autism has been caused by all of these vaccinations that are forced upon babies.
Right. And some of that,
I'm sure parents are going to be very concerned about that.
Right. And some of it does affect genetics and affects the DNA. And so the question then becomes, how has the DNA been affected in such a way that we can then either change, and in some cases, you know, these are changes that cause the amygdala to develop differently and so forth. So the question becomes, and there's some tinkering that we understand we can do in the research and development of this, which is once you understand what something's perfect model is, what if it turns out that that thing is not developed properly? What if it turns out that someone's genetics told a part of their brain cannot develop fully? And so essentially the DNA model that you want to use to make it into perfection isn't there. We know at that point that we can start to tinker with the software, because essentially if we can virtually, through the software, tell the software to build that cellular tissue, then that will be projected and then the body will build that. So there is some modification that can be done in order to restore or rebuild things that were degenerative or not supposed, or sort of, you know, due to a genetic defect were not there in the first place. So again, that's something that we have to iron out in the research and will be ironed out over time as we use the technology more and more. But we think that we can certainly use the technology to restore a brain damaged, neurologically undeveloped, potentially even developmentally disabled brains into healthy brains. And so I don't want to go too far, but I do honestly think that we can cure and restore most mental disorders, most autistic disorders, and even most mental retardation and developmentally disabled disorders.
What about in utero? If you can identify diseases early enough or deformities or something, birth defects, what about in utero? Is this machine something that you would use on a pregnant woman or no?
That's a really good question. And I think that's something that I would not want to answer right now. I mean, let me put it another way. What the devices and technology that we can use the advanced tech on, sort of, you know, the high level military technology that we have, that can be used on a woman who's still pregnant. I would not say that this technology in any way, shape, or form has been brought to a level where you can say, I'm safe and sure that it can be used on a pregnant woman.
Right.
I would say that that's something we're going to have to, a bridge we're going to have to cross when we get there, as far as asking the questions. And the first thing we'd have to do is some experiments on, you know, mammals that are pregnant, you know, and
Right.
find out what happens. And as long as nothing goes bad there, then we can continue in a process of asking that question and maybe getting to a point where we can use the technology on a pregnant woman. But if we can't answer that question, then for safety reasons, obviously we would probably just not use the technology. Or the question really becomes whole body versus partial body. I mean, you don't have to use a projector over the entire physiological body. You could certainly just use it on someone's arm or their leg. And so if you're not touching anywhere where the fetal area is that a danger? Maybe not. Maybe you're perfectly fine to do that. Maybe that's the only time you are dangerous. Again, these are things that the research and development would come out later.
Exactly. That's why you do R&D. Absolutely. That's why you do R&D.
That's why R&D costs money. Yeah, because
a lot
you
of
have to research all this stuff. Yeah, because you have to spend a lot of time doing studies and paying people to sit in labs and do studies all day long and pay assistants to do studies all day long for years until they have data that says this does this or doesn't do that. That's how studies work. It takes time and money.
And of course, you have to get that past the IRB because any research with human subjects has to get past that. Winston, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
to get to that point. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Winston, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Winston, but did you have a comment or question?
No, the consumers rest.
Consumers rest. Great questions though. I mean, because we're really trying to really think about, the more we talk about it, the more, we can start conceptualizing it in our own life. And that's why when we start demanding it, like you said, Randy, this has to be consumer driven. It has to be demanded by the consumer. That was an interesting audio effect somewhere we just got. But we have to, if people really want a quality of life, and our viewers really need, to, they're the best. Let me tell you, they're very savvy and smart viewers that we have. And because, of course, they watch Winston every Friday and Jim every Monday and all of our other reports. It's really going so well. But we all have to realize we're in a very, like you said, predatory medical system. And it's not there to heal us, but this is. And we either, people don't really get well in the, conventional system that we have. At least they don't stay well until the next illness or injury comes along. It's really just for profit. And there's nothing wrong with profit, but when that's the only thing that you think about, then it's wrong. It's morally and apprehensible. And we have to. I mean, I always kind of said capitalism with a conscience. There has to be a point in time when you have to, you have to say certainly everybody, as Winston's pointed out, should be compensated for their time. But we have to have a better quality of life. There's no question. And this is a quality of life issue. And people do need to start demanding this. If we really start to understand this is within our reach. It's not science fiction. This is within our reach. We can do this.
Yeah.
But if we want to get out of this predatory medical system, we have to demand it. So I really urge all of our viewers to do what they can to support Randy. I'm going to put these links in the description section, and to support Randy. You really just have thought this out very thoroughly. Obviously,
This is not me. I want to point out, I am, as always, my job is the public relations officer and mouthpiece of United States Marine Corps Special Section Command Staff. This is all stuff that the command staff spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about before I ever came along and did the show. So these are things that I have been informed of how we're doing this, what the plan is. I have been able to interject what I think and or my part of it and what I plan to do or what I think I can or cannot do as an independent field commander. So it's been certainly a participatory process since I've come along. But I didn't come up with this idea. This was their idea to begin with, and they put way more time thinking into it than I have. So if anyone wants to pat anyone on the back, they get the pat on the back. I'm the mouthpiece. That's all.
But we need you to, because right now the projects that they have are funded. They're black budget projects, which have money that's not legitimate money to be used. It's all money that's being, I guess, ill-gotten, and for lack of a better word. That's why
it's a gray area.
Yeah, that's why we need to have, if you want this technology, we need to have serious investors and people who want to bring this quality of life to humanity so we can move forward and humanity can move forward. Because sick people can't work. And no work means no economy, means, this is the idea. I mean, if you want a good economy, we need our people to be well, and we need to put them back into the workforce and move the economy. Would you agree, Randy?
I would 100% agree. In fact, one of our major points is understanding as a civilization what lost work time costs us. When we look at what lost sick time, injury time, all of the sort of medical leave time that costs us as a society and a civilization is huge.
I'm sure
when
it
you
is.
think of all the people who have fallen down, to the point in society where they can't afford, their medical care, and they get hurt really badly, and tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, are shouldered by the general public, which it should be, in the sense that those, we have to, as a society, shoulder that burden, but we can reduce that burden by reducing the medical impact on people, by reducing their injuries and reducing their handicaps. I mean, it might rub some people the right and wrong way when I say this, but I dream of a world in where we don't have to have handicap signs anymore, because we just don't have handicapped people anymore, because we've healed them all and restored their arms, legs, eyes, ears, and everything else that doesn't work, because we can't. So that would change the economy of a percentage of people who, because of real genuine need, have to require more from the social contract. And, let's get everybody healed so everybody can contribute to the social contract. And
Absolutely.
I think that, again, this is something that appeals to people who understand that the economy has to move, and that we're trying to help the economy move with things like this. We're not trying to destroy the economy with this kind of technology or these kinds of changes. We're trying to fix it, trying to make it healthier, trying to make it more vibrant, trying to make it competitive at a higher level, trying to build jobs, put people to work, and create more American manufacturing. We absolutely would not have this device manufactured outside of the United States. In fact, it would be a number of crimes, to be honest with you, to have it manufactured outside the United States. So the technology itself would have to be manufactured within the U.S. and would have to be manufactured by American workers.
Jobs,
So,
jobs. Trump would like what you're saying. He's trying to get those jobs, generate those jobs for the American economy. Absolutely, and you're absolutely right, Randy. This is about it's about being more productive and having a better quality of life, having people be productive in participate in the economy, and being well. And absolutely. And you know what? I just want to thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to see you again. And thank you for bringing this incredible technology and conversation to our viewers, because we've been hearing about this in different places. Of course, we first heard it from you when you first did our the very first interview we did, 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago or something like that. So this is the first time we were hearing of it besides Star Trek, but this is real. Let me just ask Winston, did you have any final comments or questions that you had for Randy before we wrap up? Or final
no, there's something I'll discuss with him later on, but no, it's been a real good interview, very informative, very well spoken. So on behalf of the viewers, we appreciate it. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to encourage the viewers. I know that there's been many people who reached out to the GoldFish Report after we had a first, initial conversation about this in a recent GoldFish Report. And please reach out to Randy because I can, pass the message along, but that's pretty much all that I can do. People have been asking, where can they get this? And that's really a question I'm just going to field over to Randy. So we're going to have his contact information in the description section, and please, folks, as Randy said, only serious people really need to contact him, because there's so clearly it's not available yet. But if you want to participate and get this, be part of manifesting this and bringing this to fruition, by all means contact Randy. And in the meantime, we can go to his GoFundMe page to help get the ball rolling for even just basic promotion material. You need to go and help with that funding and that GoFundMe page. So if we can all participate and do our share, we can move the ball along. But we have to do this ourselves, folks, because the people who are supposed to be taking care of us or looking out for us only want to benefit from us.
If I can add one more thing to that, if I can add just one example that I think is a perfect way to try and explain this. If you want potatoes and you want to plant potatoes in order to get potatoes, and it takes, what's the growing time on potato? 95 days or something like that, right? And you got potatoes and you want to plant them so you can have potatoes, but you haven't planted potatoes, you're not getting potatoes, because without putting them in the ground, that grow time never starts, right? And so until we can start this project, there's no fruit, there's no potatoes, there's nothing later to come along, no matter how long it goes along here, until we can start planting, you know, what will be able to manifest later. So
Right.
we're still at the point where people are like, why don't we have potatoes? And we're like, well, because we need to plant.
Yeah.
And so I would just want to encourage people to think about it in that way. If you want this to happen, then you want those potatoes planted in the ground now, not next year, not 2 years from now, not 3 years from now, because that will delay potatoes by that many years if that's how long it takes to get potatoes in the ground.
Mhm.
So we want to get this crop in the ground so that it will bear fruit ASAP,
Mhm.
not years down the road, so that we can actually bring this to people.
I'd
And
like to.
anyone who's serious, let me say one more thing. Anyone who's
Go ahead.
really serious about investing, we have made it very clear that access to the technology will be available to serious investors way sooner than anybody else. So the people who really, 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 you know, want to invest and want access to this technology, their motivation is front of the line before there's ever access to the general public ever.
Sure.
So you want that access, then, you know, you have to be a, you know, 5-star investor who's willing to get this off the ground. And I'm happy to let you get an e-ticket to go to the front of the line for that exchange. I'm happy to do that. But, you know, it has to happen for this to get done.
Well, I was just going to say that I really hope that I hope you'll come back and give us an update on how things are going, and inform our viewers on, you know, how the project is going and coming along, because they're going to want to hear what the progress is like and how things are going. So, you know, would you come back and talk to us again, give us an update, you know, at some point in the future to kind of great. Let me just ask you then, what other that was a good way to look at it. Of course, we have to plant the seeds if you want to bear fruit later. Absolutely good analogy. But according to the technology, is there anything else that you want to leave our viewers with to give them a little sense that, you know, this is really real technology. This is not hyperbole. This is real, and you're doing everything you can to try to make this happen. And this is something that will instantly boost our quality of life. What kind of last thoughts do you have for our viewers if you were talking to them right now, which you will be?
Sure. Well, again, there's two major components for making this work: a software component and the hardware component. The software component, we understand, is just a matter of time to work that problem. We understand the same thing about the hardware, but the hardware is problems that just take time. We've watched both of these technologies, the software and the hardware, develop over time, right? You can just look back last 10, 20 years and say, how have these technologies grown based on the spur of investment in industrial technologies, software and hardware technologies, to get them farther and farther along to where they are right now, as opposed to where they were 10 or 20 years ago. So by that very same token, we don't even need to guess whether we're going to get to the place where hardware and software are at the advanced level that we need them to be. They will be. Question is, are we going to get there first? Right? And if we don't have time to do it, we don't have the money to do it, we don't have the resources to do it, well, then we won't be the ones to do it first. Someone else will. But if, you know, but that component of that technology might still be something that we need, but if someone invents it first, well, you know, now what, I have to go through somebody else to get a proprietary patent, right, to deal with something else. So, you know, to be able to use our device, we don't have to deal with that. So essentially, we know that these technologies will come along. They will, because they're already in development, right? The software is already in development. The hardware is already in development. People are already working these problems to better levels of precision, just not in the way that we are, for the reasons that we are. So they're wandering around, not going in the direction that we are, not headed to the place that we are, but they are developing these technologies and they're moving them forward. So whether we participate in that or not, those technologies will happen. But because we know where we want to go with those technologies, and we know exactly what technologies we need to get us there, we're still the most precise, most direct wagon to get us there, because no one else is going in the right direction. They're just trying to develop those technologies for some other industrial or specific purpose based on the very narrow view of what they're working on and what they're doing. We see the development of these technologies as working towards a very specific goal for a very specific outcome, and we know what specific problems we want to work with those components and those technologies that, again, other people are already working. We just know that if we start working them, we can work them better, faster, and more directly to get the results that we want, because we know what we're trying to get to. We're not just blindly trying to develop things and then eventually, oh, hey, this could combine with that and do this. No, we know what we're after. We know what we want to get to. We just have to find the way to get from A to C.
Right.
How did we be from here to there? And it's with the process of pointing that technology development in that direction and having engineers work the problems that we already know what the problems are that they need to work. So
Exactly.
It's going to take some time, but the sooner we start, the less time it will take. And there is no way in which we are blind, dumbfounded, or confused, or don't know what we're going to do. There's no problem that we've come across or talked about where I've said, oh, gee, what are we going to do about that? No, we have addressed every problem, every process, every protocol, and we have a trajectory for how all of that's going to go. Now we're going to address all of those problems.
Excellent. Well, it's very well thought out.
We've been very thorough.
You're extremely intelligent, Randy. I mean, without hesitation, you talk about this because you have experience with it, and I think that's something that is.
And we talk about it a lot. I mean, my brigadier and I and my chief engineer, we discuss this stuff a bit.
Right.
We talk about it a lot.
And what's different about you is that you have personal experience with it. So you really know this in an intimate way more than anybody else who would be trying to, I think, try to.
I can tell you that drives me in a very interesting and special way. I'm not going to lie. It does make me know where we're going.
Right.
There are certain things that I have been asked to do or understand that if I didn't have a personal experience of it, there was a lot of trust involved.
Right.
A lot of trust. I don't have to trust with this.
Yeah.
Not at all, because I've been there, done it, used it. I don't have to trust that we're going in the right direction. I know where we're going. So.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. It's really been a pleasure, and we certainly wish you the best of luck on the GoldFish Report. And we hope to have you back soon, maybe within the next few months, to talk about the starting, the liftoff of the project, and how things are going to go. So we'll come back and do an update, and we really hope that we have some response from viewers to help participate in that and make that happen. So, folks, as I said, the contact information for Randy is going to be in the description section of the video. So anybody who has already contacted GoldFish Report, and there have been many people who have contacted us, please, by all means, contact Randy. Go to Randy. We're going to put his email in there, and you can go to it. We're going to put his website in there as well, and of course the GoFundMe page. So, folks, this is exciting stuff. Let's all make this happen. Let's all bring this to fruition so we can have a better quality of life on this planet. It's about time. So I want to thank you all so much, and I want to let our viewers know we'll be back tomorrow morning with another edition of Country Roads. Well, actually, I'm not sure when this is going to be published. It might be after Country Roads. Actually, tomorrow might be after tomorrow. So we'll be back. We'll be seeing you. We have lots of interviews going to be published in the next few days. So, Randy, good to see you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. And this concludes this edition.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Randy and Winston. We'll see you tomorrow, Winston. And this concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report.